What's up guys, it's James here, Airbnb expert and author of the upcoming Airbnb for Dummies. And in today's video, I want to talk a bit about rental arbitrage. It's a really popular business model in Airbnb where you rent a property and then flip it onto Airbnb and make a profit. And you have a condition in your lease essentially that allows you to be able to sublet that property. Now, specifically, I've talked about rental arbitrage before on this channel, but I want to address specifically in this video a video that Sean from Airbnb Automated recently released on his channel talking about one of his students, Heather, who was able to pick up a rental property where they were able to negotiate 3 months completely free, and it's a fully furnished property and there's no security deposit. So basically this person is getting this property for free for the next 3 months under a 3-year lease agreement. So I want to share my thoughts on that, on the overall, should you start as an average person getting involved with Airbnb rental arbitrage? Now there's crazy deals to be had out there like Heather was able to get. And then overall, just kind of my thoughts on the economics of that rental arbitrage business model. So to start off with, should you go and start snatching up deals? Because there are deals all over the place. Like there are going to be other cases like Heather, like Sean mentioned, other of his students, other of his listeners who are going to be able to find properties that they can get for very, very cheap, that they can get, really cool conditions on their leases, like getting the first 3 months completely free. And so should you, the average person who wants to get started on Airbnb, use this time to go out and find deals like that and get started? Well, the short answer is no. I really genuinely don't think that the average person should get involved in rental arbitrage. And I've talked about that before on this channel, like I mentioned. But even right now, when things are, there's really great deals to be had. Right now, if you're renting a property and you're planning on using it for rental arbitrage, you want to flip it onto Airbnb, that is a very, very speculative investment to be making right now in this current climate, because not only are you speculating on how long everything that's going on right now is going to last, you're also speculating on what the bounce back is going to look like. The reality is we don't know if there's going to be a jump in tourism once things open back up and that suddenly we're going to get right back up to normal or close to it, or whether it's going to last for the next 12, 18 months and be a really slow climb back up to where things normally were. And so if you're on the hook for rent, then that's going to be a really challenging speculation to make because ultimately you're just kind of going to be gambling to a certain extent. And now I know a lot of you are probably thinking, well, you're not actually making any investment because Heather, like Sean talked about, wasn't actually paying anything for rent for the first 3 months. But the reality is, even though Heather didn't pay a security deposit, didn't pay rent up front, didn't pay anything for furniture, that sort of stuff, Heather still was making a really large investment. Yes, that the payments for that investment are spread out over 3 years, but Heather is still tied into an investment. Now, obviously she could opt out, but no one wants to start a business with the intention of opting out of that later on down the road. And so you are still making a really large investment, and at this point it is very speculative. Now, all that aside, let's just completely ignore everything going on in the world right now and look at the economics of the business model and why I think that it's not a really great business model for most people. Now, it's not to say that the business model doesn't work. Obviously it does. Sean is proof of that. He's built a really great business, a nice large business, big portfolio he's got, mostly over in Texas by the sounds of it, that is doing really well, and that works really well for Sean. But having gone through and actually built a business, and I started out in rental arbitrage and then later transitioned over to a co-hosting model, which I'll talk about later, I can say that for most people, I don't think that rental arbitrage is a good fit, and here's why. Number one, you've got a high cost of starting up. You've got to make a high initial investment, a large initial investment to get the business even off the ground. And so you've got to put a bunch of your hard-earned money and invest that into getting the business started to pick up a property. Now, obviously there are some cases like Heather's and that you can get into right now where that's not the case, and you can get a very little initial investment and potentially even recoup all the money that you'll need for that initial investment, so that like Heather, like Sean talked about in the video, he mentioned that Heather may be able to get some bookings in over the next 3 months and build up enough cash pile to actually pay for the first month that she actually needs to pay rent. And so you could do it that way, but in most cases you are going to be paying out of pocket for the actual startup of the business. Now, the second reason I don't think it makes sense for the average person is because there's a high amount of fixed operating expenses monthly. You've got your rent payment to cover, and that's not a variable expense. It doesn't matter how your business is doing. It's not like you can just gear that down, like marketing expense, for example, where you can just decide you're going to go lower on growth and then you're going to stop spending on advertising, something like that. It's a fixed monthly cost every single month, whether you're bringing in $3,000 a month, $10,000 a month, or $10 a month, like a lot of hosts are right now, you still are on the hook for that monthly rent agreement. Right? And so, yes, again, you can break that, but that means breaking you down your business. It means dissolving your business, and that's not what you want to do. You don't want to have a business that has those high monthly overhead expenses that in order to remove them, you have to basically dissolve your business and start breaking it down or chunking away at it. And for most people, that also means a large degree of stress. You know, for some people, they can handle that a lot better than others, but for the average person looking to get a business going and looking to make their own income, maybe some side income, having that amount of stress looming over their head from the liability they have each month is not a really good option. Now, the third reason I think that it's not a great business model for the average person is because there's a long turnaround time on getting a return on your investment. Because the initial investment on most properties is quite large and the cash flow each month on an average property is going to be relatively little in comparison, you're going to be in a typical scenario anywhere from 2 to 6, sometimes even a little bit longer, but for the average property, if you pick a good one, you're going to be looking at 2 to 6 months turnaround time. Now, some of you may think, okay, that's not that long, but that means that you're going to have to be working essentially for free for 2 to 6 months. Now, it's not most people's idea of what their goal is when they're starting a business to generate some side income. You know, you want to be compensated for your time, and the reality is it's not a passive investment to be managing properties on Airbnb. You are actively working on it. You're managing bookings, you're setting pricing, you're organizing cleaners, especially when you're first getting started out. You're going to be doing a lot of that stuff manually yourself. And so doing that for free for a number of months is not a really great option. The other challenge with the long turnaround time to get ROI is that it makes it challenging to grow your business. Every time you want to grow your business, you have to take your profit and reinvest it into the business to get another property. And it's really tough to do that. You can't just, for most people, go and pick up 5 properties right off the bat, because to do that would take a substantial amount of money. And then if you want to grow your business, you're constantly taking your cash flow and reinvesting it back into the business to keep growing it, rather than using that cash flow to actually support your livelihood and earn any kind of an actual profit that you can live off of. Yes, your business is technically earning profit, but you're constantly reinvesting that back into the growth of the business. And so that's a challenge with it more than other businesses. I realize that all businesses do need you to reinvest in them to keep growing them. You need to feed it, you need to water it like a plant so that it'll grow. But for other businesses using different business models, you don't have to grow your invest into growing your inventory. Like, for example, a YouTube channel, different businesses like that, the co-hosting model, like I'll talk to you about in a minute here, you're reinvesting time and you're reinvesting money in some situations to maybe upgrade your equipment or to go and advertise, things like that. But to actually get more listings to manage, you don't necessarily have to invest that if you're doing something like co-hosting. You don't have to invest thousands of dollars just to get another listing. And then the fourth and final reason why I find that Airbnb rental arbitrage is not generally a good fit for most people is because you've got a high degree of risk looming over your head at all times. Like I mentioned before, if you're growing the business relatively aggressively or even relatively conservatively, honestly, you're still going to be, no matter what, reinvesting your profits back into the growth of the business to pick up new listings, furnish them, pay the security deposit. And so you end up in a situation where you have a higher and higher amount of potential income from the business. Now, you don't have a higher amount of income because you're constantly actually taking that profit, reinvesting it, so it never ends up in your pocket as income until you stop growing the business, but you have a greater and greater amount of potential monthly income. And then once you get yourself to a peak, to a plateau where you want to sit there and you want to just leave the business at, say, 10 properties or 20 properties or wherever you've got it sat at for a period of time, then you can let the business operate. You can run the business day to day. You can start putting people in place and you can actually make a decent income off of it. Until that point, though, you're constantly just building up potential income. And so if something comes along and it disrupts that and it somehow challenges that, then in all that backlog of time, you haven't actually been earning income from your labor, from the work that you've been putting in. And so something like, for example, let's say city regulation comes into effect and it stops you and it takes away your ability from hosting, from managing your short-term rentals, from doing whatever it is you're doing, then you could have found yourself in a position where you built up a whole bunch, you spent 6 months or a year building a business and it's sort of all for nothing, because depending on how long of a lead time you get to wind things down, that's the number of months that you're going to have to actually earn profit. If the city turns around and says, hey, James, 3 months from now, you've got to shut things down. We're not letting Airbnbs operate the way that you're operating, or there's a night cap or something like that in the city. 3 months from now, you've got to shut down. Well, great. I've got 3 months with however many properties I have to earn a profit, and then it's closed up. Then I'm shut down, and I've got to either reestablish in a new city, start over from scratch, or do something else different. And it creates a really big headache, and it's just a lot of risk to have looming over my head as an average person just looking to start a business. Now, does that mean that someone should not get started in Airbnb? Does that mean that Airbnb in general is something that you should only do if you have a property, if you own a property, if you've invested into it and you want to do it for some supplemental income? No. And this is something else that Sean has talked about a little bit less on his channel. It's something that I'm an expert in. It's something that I do with students all the time, and that I do myself to a high degree, is something called the co-hosting fee model, the management fee model. It's referred to under different names. But essentially what that is managing a property for a percentage of the overall revenue. Now, full disclosure, I do have a program that teaches this. I have a bunch of training built around this, so I am particularly biased. If you do want to check out any of that training, I have a link to it down in the description below. And while I'm off topic a little bit, please give this video a thumbs up. I really appreciate it. It helps me out tremendously with YouTube algorithm. And if you want more great Airbnb and co-hosting related content, then feel free to subscribe to the channel. I would absolutely love to have you here. But kind of getting back on topic here, if we talk about co-hosting for a minute and why I think it's a better model for the average person, it's because with co-hosting, you don't have to invest any money to get the business off the ground, or very little at least. You don't have to invest into growing the business constantly by renting out new properties, because you're partnering with the landlords. You're partnering with the property owner, and you're getting a percentage of revenue. They're paying for furniture, they're paying for photography, all those things. Sometimes you can do that as a bonus to them if you want, but there's very little upfront expense to actually start growing the business and to get it off the ground. So there's upfront investment is relatively little, and the ongoing expense that you don't have a high monthly overhead, because each month you don't have a rent payment to cover. You just have whatever operating expenses you have that should be more than covered by the revenues you have coming in, because they're all quite variable. If you have a high cleaning expense, it means that you had a lot of cleanings and you collected a large amount of cleaning fees, and so therefore you wouldn't be losing any money. Now, the other thing that's nice about it is that you can grow it a lot more quickly, because again, you don't need to be having a big cash reserve. You can hypothetically go and just pick up 5 properties right off the bat. Now, obviously having the right strategies and tools to do so is a little bit more challenging, and that's why I exist. That's why I have the trainings that I have and why I built all that stuff out. But hypothetically, if you have all the tools and you have the training, you have the know-how, there's nothing stopping you from just going and picking up 5 properties right now today and having them listed on Airbnb shortly and starting to earn consistent monthly income from that. Now, yes, you in some situations will earn less than what you would on rental arbitrage, but from my experience, and don't trust my word for it, but I'm going to leave a link below in the description as well, where you can download a tool that I built called the Profitability Projection Tool. That's going to allow you to project the profitability of different properties in your area, given data from your area, so you can run the numbers yourself and compare the profit you would earn by having a property on rental arbitrage versus having on a co-hosting on a management fee model. You can compare and contrast those numbers yourself and figure out for yourself which properties make the most sense under which model. By all means, we will sometimes pick up unicorn properties, is what we call them, that are going to do exceptionally well, and we'll pick them up under a fixed rent agreement because it makes a lot more sense to do so. But with the average property, the risk reward profile doesn't make a lot of sense. You're better off letting go of maybe $100 or $200 a month in cash flow that you would have otherwise potentially gotten from doing the rental arbitrage model, and taking it on under co-hosting, where you're going to take a little bit less monthly cash flow but have no upfront expense, no monthly overhead, no risk, no stress to worry about looming over your head. So overall, I think that the co-hosting model is a much better business model, especially for the average person. Now, again, that's not to say that rental arbitrage doesn't work. Obviously it does. And it's not to say that it's a bad call for everyone. It's just to say that for most people, and in my opinion, for the average person looking to get started and looking to dip their feet in the water and start building a business, co-hosting model is a way less risky and way more enjoyable way to start the business in that sense. So that's my thoughts on the matter overall. And then my other thought on it, my one last kind of closing piece on it, is I just want to say thank you very much again to Sean for the videos he puts together. I do really believe that his videos are great and that all of his expertise in hosting is fantastic. I think at this time we really need to, as a hosting community, stick together and really learn from one another, help each other out. So again, if you want to learn more about Airbnb hosting and you want to learn more about the co-hosting management fee model, that's mainly what I talk about on this channel. So feel free to subscribe. And again, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I work hard to deliver great value to you guys in these videos. And so if you liked it, please just show your support, give it a quick thumbs up. It really does help me out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. So with all that being said, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.